By day the town wore an honest face. Laundry swung from balconies like faded flags, dogs wandered the alleys, and the river kept its slow, workmanlike promise to carry water past the mills. Elders in wicker chairs measured time by the angle of the sun and the length of their shadows. In such ordinary light, fear had no place to sit. But the town was older than its paint and braver than it pretended. It had outlived fires and famines, watched empires redraw maps, and learned to keep certain stories folded small. When dusk gathered between the cypresses, shutters clicked closed not in panic, but as habit. No one said the name. Doing so would make the night listen. Children learned the rule before they learned the alphabet: do not follow the river after sundown. They did not ask why. They did not need to. The water itself seemed to stiffen at twilight, a dark band tightening around the town's waist. The path along the reeds refused footprints, as if the earth had decided it would swallow anything that tried. There were explanations, always: river fog, migrating birds, a trick of wind in the cane. The baker's wife believed the millstones sang to each other. The schoolteacher insisted it was drainage. The priest said nothing at all. And yet every house kept a cup of water by the door, a coin under the mat, and a pinch of salt on the sill. Travelers came through now and then. They noticed the river's bend like a held breath and the way conversations thinned at the sound of a distant cry, though perhaps it was only the squeal of iron. Travelers finished their suppers early and slept with boots close to hand. In the morning they left a little faster than seemed polite. The legend had many versions, each as careful as a stitched wound. There was a bride with a veil heavy as rain, a mother whose grief had become a geography, a woman wronged until the world itself bent to her sorrow. In some tellings she drowned, in others she drowned her children and then herself, in a few she never died at all. She simply learned to live where we cannot. On the far bank, willows leaned like conspirators. Their reflection made a second town that wavered and disagreed with the first. On that uncertain surface, faces came apart and reassembled into strangers. The ferryman stopped working at dusk. He claimed it was because the current grew tricky, but his eyes told on him, he had heard her too often. Some nights the cry arrived early, while the last geese still arrowed home. Some nights it waited until the hour when even dogs sleep and the moon tests the locks. It did not always come from the river. Once it rose from the well in the square. Once it threaded through the organ pipes. Once it came from the bell that had not rung in years. The town learned to carry on. Bread needed baking, roofs needed patching, babies needed naming. In this way, the ordinary made room for the terrible, like a host accommodating a difficult guest. The cups of water grew cloudy, the coins wore thin. The salt clumped. Yet the ritual continued, its meaning shifting but never vanishing. And always, beneath the habits, the story waited, a woman whose tears did not dry, a curse that traveled by listening. A person might live a whole life in the town and never see her. Yet they would make choices as if she were watching, which is nearly the same thing. The town remained, and the river kept its counsel. Night after night, a question stood up in the dark and did not sit down. I did not believe it, not truly. I believed in bad timing and damp wood, in wind traveling along unlikely corridors, in the way grief echoes from one person to the next until nobody remembers who started it. I believed in my own good sense. The night I first heard her, I had left the window ajar because he'd clung to the plaster like a second skin. At first the sound was shapeless, the way a sob becomes the ghost of speech when it passes through a wall. Then a single syllable untied itself from the rest. It might have been a name. It might have been mine. My stomach tilted as if the floor had shifted under 1 foot only. I told myself it was the river water has so many ways to speak. I set a glass on the sill. The air above the water held a metallic smell, old coins and lightning. The reeds made a narrow corridor for the wind. Between their thin green spines, something moved with a patience that felt deliberate. Not a person. Not an animal. A shape the night remembered even when the town pretended to forget. The next day I told no one. I carried the sound inside my mouth as if it would escape if I opened my teeth too wide. In daylight, shame is louder than fear. I worked. I swept the shop. I stacked jars of buttons and lengths of blue thread. Each clink touched the memory of that sob and made it ring again. When dusk came, it felt like a door I had promised to open. She did not come when invited. She came when I had given up waiting, when the candle had guttered low and the street had decided to be empty. The weeping rose from the river like mist seeking a throat. I leaned into it, not brave, not curious exactly, but tired of standing between belief and ridicule. The crying found me the way rain finds a leak. I could not tell you how long I listened. Time warped around the sound and came back unfamiliar. I learned the edges of her grief by touch. It had no breath, and yet I swore it breathed. It had no body, and yet I felt it lean. When it paused, I counted. When it resumed, I could not remember what number came next. On the 4th night I whispered back. I do not know what I said. I think I offered my name as if it were a handkerchief. The crying stuttered, startled by the idea that I might be a person and not a wall. Then I heard the scrape of fabric. The window's glass seated itself more tightly in the frame. The room grew colder without moving air. I began to find water where I had not left it, a wet ring on the table, a shine on the stair, the bottommost step dark as a tongue. I learned to wipe the damp with a towel I kept folded on a chair. When I wrung it out, the water clung to itself like a secret and refused to fall until it was ready. The old woman next door stopped me in the lane and pressed a coin into my palm. For the threshold, she said without looking at me. Her thumb carried the smell of candle wax. Don't let her cross where you haven't paid. I did not ask who she meant. Questions are invitations. I had already invited enough. The more I listened, the more I recognized shapes inside the weeping, a lullaby broken into shards, a prayer chewed to gristle, a word that had once been no and had become an animal with many legs. Sometimes I thought I heard children's laughter braided through her sobs like a ribbon you only glimpse when the braid turns. I dreamed I was holding a child, and my arms had no strength. I dreamed the river had hands, and every fish wore a wedding ring. I woke to find my pillow damp and my mouth tasting of salt. When I spit into the basin, the water clouded as if I'd poured milk into it. The cry continued from somewhere nobody had built. The 5th night, she called me by my childhood nickname, a name I had not heard since my mother died. I felt the syllables slide over my skull like cold oil. I told myself this was the oldest trick, take what you know and feed it back to yourself until you can't tell whether you are hungry or full. Still, my knees weakened. Still, I opened the door. Outside, the street made a narrow throat, and the houses leaned in to hear what I would say. I said nothing. I crossed to the river path. My shoes filled with grit, and the night made a fine powder that lived in my hair. As I neared the reeds, the crying sharpened, as if the sound itself had put a knife between its teeth. She stood where the path met the water, but stood is a generous word. Her dress moved as if underwater, and her hair clung to her shoulders in strands thick as rope. The face did what faces do in dreams, it refused detail. Only the mouth existed, trembled open, and released a sound that unstitched me. I did not run. I did not kneel. I simply forgot what those verbs meant. She lifted her hands, and I understood that she was asking for something I could not carry, something that weighed more than a body and less than a memory. I thought of the cup of water on my sill, the coin under my mat, the salt on the threshold. Tricks, talismans, etiquette. I had brought nothing. I had brought myself like a door left unlatched. When she lowered her hands, the river made the sound of a page turning. Behind her, shapes moved as if deciding whether they were children or shadows. The weeping broke into pieces and then reassembled like birds startled and then settling again on a wire. My name entered the water and came back carrying mud. I woke on the bank with my cheek in the reeds and my throat raw. The sun had taken the river in its arms and found it too cold to comfort. My shoes were missing. In their place were wet footprints leading to my door, sized exactly like mine, but not mine. When I followed them, the old woman was waiting with a towel. She did not ask. She pressed the towel into my hands and said, "Pay." I placed the coin on the threshold and poured water over it so the metal winked like an opened eye. I did not know what debt I was settling. I only knew I wanted the crying to find some other house, some other mouth, some other story to live in. I do not think it works like that. Curses are not debts, they are conversations. From that day the sound followed me into hours it did not own. Afternoon would be bright, and somewhere a quiet weeping threaded between the clatter of plates and the gossip of birds. A mirror in the shop warped for a heartbeat and then pretended it had not. The bell on the door rang before anyone entered. I tried to research the legend in ledgers and parish books. Names repeat in towns like these. I found brides who were not wives for long, mothers who were not mothers for long, floods that washed years clean of facts. The margins held notes that looked like prayers and read like warnings. A thumbprint stained one page with a whirl that resembled the river's bend. That night I promised myself I would not look out the window. I placed the towel over the glass like a shroud. I salted the sill until it resembled a shaken snow. I lay on the floor and counted my breaths. The crying arrived as if it had been waiting for me to keep my promise, and now it could reward my obedience. It filled the room without entering. I spoke to her in a whisper so small I could deny it later. I asked what she wanted. The weeping pitched upward and then fell, the way a wave prepares to break and decides against it. A word formed, tight as a fist. Return, it might have been. Or remorse. Or the first note of my name again, stretched until it tore. The towel darkened. A wet place the size of a palm bloomed and spread. It was as if someone had leaned their head against the other side of the glass and breathed. I thought of the warning, do not look directly at her face. I thought of how mirrors call to children. I thought of a hand knocking on a door that is not a door at all, but a mouth. I slept in bursts, tripped awake by the sensation of hair on my forearm that was not mine. Once I sat up to find long wet strands coiled like river weed across the floorboards. They smelled of iron and lilies. I gathered them into a basin. In the morning, the basin was dry. The hair had gone somewhere houses cannot follow. On the seventh night the weeping contained a lullaby I knew word for word though I had never heard it sung. My bones recognized the key. My teeth hummed along the nerves. She sang of a river that scratched its own name into stone until the stone bled. She sang of children who grew gills so they could return for one last kiss. She sang of a mother's mouth filling with water until it could no longer hold a prayer. I asked again what she wanted. This time the answer did not arrive as sound. It arrived as wet footprints across the pages of my ledger, as a tiny handprint on the inside of the window, as the coin on the threshold turning cold enough to burn. I understood then that the curse was not about guilt alone. It was about custody. Sorrow seeks a keeper. On the 9th night, I refused. I laid out salt in the shape of a circle and sat inside it with my knees to my chest. The crying circled the walls, testing, softening corners, finding angles. It did not cross the line. It did not need to. It waited. Curses have all the time that was stolen from them. I could have left town. People do. They go upriver or cross the hills and forget the names of their own streets. But leaving is a way of staying. You carry the house inside your ribs. I stayed. I bought more salt. I set cups of water like sentries. The old woman shook her head and began to plait thin cords of willow, which she hung above my door like question marks. The next evening, rain arrived without clouds. It fell from a clear sky in a sheet so fine it seemed woven. The river rose and ebbed in the same breath. The town shrugged weather, it said, as if weather were not a language like any other. I watched from the window no towel this time until I saw her hand on the glass, fingers long as reeds, nails like torn moons. Between the spread of those fingers, I saw my own reflection interrupted, refracted into versions of me that had made different choices. In one, I never opened the door. In one, I ran to the priest. In one, I threw the cup of water and watched it turn to coins in midair. The woman's weeping braided those futures into a rope and pulled. I spoke a name that was not mine and also was. It came from the bottom of my lungs, from the part of the river that moves even when the surface seems still. The weeping paused. Outside, a shape leaned closer. The glass bowed the smallest measurable distance, like a prayer deciding whether it was honest enough to be heard. I understood then that the story the town told left out what stories always leave out, the bargain. Not a single bargain, but a custom offer water, offer coin, offer salt, and perhaps grief will pass your door to rest somewhere else. We had all agreed, quietly, to let the river choose a house when it must. I had become that house because I had listened too carefully. And still, in the weeping, I heard a mercy the town refused to admit. She did not drag me to the water. She waited for me to open. She asked. She begged. She demanded, yes, but she did not break the lock. I thought of the word keeper again and wondered if I had misheard it as prisoner. The 10th night, I went to the river. Not because the sound compelled me, but because silence had begun to sound like a lie. The path was slick with intention. The moon had put a coin on its edge and left it spinning. I carried no salt, no coin, no water. I carried a name like a knife I meant to surrender. The bank gave way under me as if the ground had been practicing. My feet slid into water colder than memory. The reeds closed, not as a trap, but as a curtain. In that narrow green room, the air learned to breathe water, and my lungs obeyed out of politeness. She rose, not from the river but from the idea of it, a woman-shaped pause in the world, dripping a grammar the living do not speak. Her hair clung to her like written apologies. Her hands lifted as if to cradle the sky and found only me. The mouth opened wider than a mouth must and kept going until it made a door. I heard voices behind her, the soft complaint of children woken from bad dreams, the stern murmur of a vow broken at an altar, the scrape of a ring across stone. They tugged at the edges of her sobs, trying to weave themselves into something like music. The river translated all of it into a demand. My name landed in that demand like a coin into a deep well. The sound went down and did not come back. I understood I was not being asked to die. I was being asked to hold. To hold what the weight answered by stepping into me. Cold rushed up my arms. My bones remembered the shape of absence. A face formed where faces should not be, in the ripple, in the mist, in the white seam of river light. I kept my eyes on her hands. Fingers longer now, or perhaps the night was stretching them. They ached to touch my shoulders the way a storm aches to find a tree. The willows bent, generous and cruel. The old woman's cords of willow knocked against each other above my door miles away, a faint wooden prayer. I thought of going back. I thought of being someone who could go back. The river pulled that thought apart like bread and fed it to fish that were not fish. My knees met water. Cold climbed to my waist. She spoke without words. The message pressed against my teeth from the inside. Return. Remorse. River. The vocabulary of curses is small and endlessly sufficient. I opened my mouth to refuse and found it already full. Something passed between us that was not water and not breath. The world pivoted on a slick axis. Children's hands, or the memory of them, touched my wrists. Not to pull me under. To weigh me down with expectation. Grief, I learned, is not drowning. Grief is flotation in water that will never warm. I would not sink. I would not climb out. I would learn to live where her story lived. Then the mistake revealed itself, not hers, but ours. The town had never been cursed by a woman who cried. The town had cursed her, demanded she carry what it refused to name, and then made a ritual out of surviving her. We had built the rules: water, coin, salt, to keep sorrow moving like a tax cart, door to door. I saw it all at once, each house paying a little, each threshold gleaming with the same false mercy, each child taught the same silence. She had not drowned her children. We had. We had drowned them in the river of our convenience, in the fast current of forgetting. She was the collector, not the thief. The river paused, listening to this new story forming in me. The weeping dimmed, not in relief but in recognition. I raised my hands not in surrender, not in defense, but in that oldest human gesture that means, I will carry what I can. The water accepted the pledge the way earth accepts a footprint, by beginning to erase it. The woman's mouth closed to a human size. Her hair, still wet as the first night of the world, drifted back from her face. I did not look directly, I learned the lesson well. But I felt a gaze pass through me and out the other side. It left a hollow where certainty had lived. Into that hollow, something like purpose flowed. You are reading this with the window closed. You are sensible. You have wiped your sill. You have no coin under your mat because you live in a century that prefers plastic to metal. You keep your salt in a grinder because it looks nice on the counter. You tell yourself rivers are for photographs and picnics. You are not wrong. You are only incomplete. Tonight, when the house performs its small orchestra, pipes ticking, wood settling, the fridge confessing one sound will not match the rest. It will be thinner and older and will know your name without having to be taught. Do not say the name out loud. The night is always listening for places to live. You will feel a wet ring appear beneath your glass. You will wipe it away and it will return. You will think of the word keeper and dislike it. You will want to be a passerby in your own story, a traveler who leaves after supper. You may. The road makes room for you. But the river remembers longer than roads. When you hear the crying because you will be tempted to look. Do not. There are other gestures that mean attention. Open your palm over a bowl of water and hold it steady until your hand shakes. Count your breaths and forget the number. Think of the children you were and the ones you will never meet. Say nothing aloud. She does not want your fear. Fear is easy and costs nothing. She wants the thing you drag behind your days like a chain you have taught yourself not to hear. She wants what you avoid with errands and headlines. Offer a piece of it. Not all. She is not greedy. She knows what it is to be made of taking. If you live by a river, you will go there without deciding to. If you live by a road, you will hear tires hiss like water. If you live in a high building, the wind will climb the stairwell with wet feet. It is all the same story looking for the right mouth. Tonight it is yours. Tomorrow if you are lucky it will be less so. Do not ask whether she drowned. Ask what we drowned so she would not have to sing alone. Do not say her name into your phone where the glass can learn it. Do not post your sorrow where it can be harvested. Sit with it until the room grows quiet enough to tell the truth. We owed her, and we paid her in doors and coins and cups of water, and it was not enough. You can leave the coin under your mat if it helps your hands. You can lay out salt if it calms your mind. But understand that the bargain changed. Grief will not be taxed anymore. It will live where it is invited to be held. When the crying tests your windows, you will answer not with a lock but with attention that does not break. Now listen, the sound outside your window is subtle as breath on glass. It lengthens the dark like a seam being tugged. You are not in danger the way a tale wants you to think. You are in danger the way a bridge is in danger when too many feet cross at once. You support what passes. You bend. You do not break if you learn the rhythm. She is nearer. The wet smell is iron and lilies. On your sill, a small print pales and brightens as if deciding whether to belong to this world. Do not look directly. You already know her face because you have imagined it 100 times. Look at your hands instead. Notice how ready they are to lift, to cradle air that will not keep its shape. When she whispers, you will hear your own voice with the river braided through it. You will think, briefly, that there are more of you than one life can hold. You will be right. The house will tilt. The night will learn your name. And you will learn hers without needing to say it. After, you will notice water where you did not leave it. You will begin to pay attention at odd hours. You will remember that grief is not a ghost but a guest, and some guests make the house more honest. You will carry what you can, and it will be both too much and not enough. This is how curses end when they do, not with victory, but with custody shared. Go to the window. Do not open it. Place your coin, whatever you use to mark promises, beneath the sill. Lay a ribbon of salt if you like. Then sit. Wait. Listen. The crying woman is not only by the river anymore. She travels by listening. She has found you. And in the space between one sob and the next, you will decide what kind of keeper you will be. You breathe, and the window fogs. You listen, and the night answers. You do not turn on the light. You do not say her name. You hold.